Hey everybody, it is good to be back. I took off a couple of weeks. I had a variety of things going on in life at that time. Most of all, going to what is going to be like kind of my near official last ortho appointment for my broken ankle. So making great news and great progress there. So for anybody that's been kind of keeping up with all the stuff in my life on Facebook, then that's a little quick update for you. But anyway, moving right along to today's hot topic. And this, let me tell you, is a hot topic. It's a real hot topic, and it's one I've been thinking about for a long time. It's one that I really wanted to be thoughtful in my delivery because it is a hot topic from the perspective of it is a very real time in our history that a lot of things around racial injustices, but also just racial understanding is starting to finally surface in a way that probably should have for a very long time. And I thought the best contribution that I could make is to share here with my community. Who better than an audience than for all of you who can, say, hey, Angela's somebody that I know and I can relate to her and I have a desire, I hope, to understand her and to get to know her. So that's what drove all of this today, and it drove this topic that I'm entitling Don't Whitewash Me. And I'll get into an explanation about what that means. That being said, let me preface a couple things. One is I apologize in advance. We, after a year and a half hiatus, are back into full-blown construction in my house. Hence why you will hear a lot of sawing in the background. So I apologize in advance for listening to all of that. The other part is that I cannot do this topic justice in 10 minutes. So grab some popcorn, grab a little coffee, a little snacks, and hunker down. It's probably going to be something approaching closer to 20, 25, 30 minutes, for me to really do this topic the justice that it deserves. So I hope it's a worthwhile time that I'm sharing with you here. The topic of not being whitewashed is a phrase or a description that I would use that is maybe something that's very close to a term called color blindness that I know in my growing up was something that was believed to be a good thing. And I remember being a kid and growing up and thinking being colorblind is a good thing and not really understanding, like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be blind to a very real aspect of another human being? To be blind, not just to the tone or the shade of their skin, but to also be blind to their culture, to be blind to characteristics and of their ethnicity that means a lot to them, to their identity. Interestingly enough, I think the perspectives I bring are gonna, be one where if there are extremisms on one side or the other, meaning people who exclusively come from a white background, a white upbringing, they themselves are white, the people they surround themselves are white, or people that are people of color, and that is the group of folks that they're typically around. I think that, I have experiences in both of those worlds. Literally half of me comes from my father's side, which is a German American background, and the other half of me comes from my mother's Filipino background, and my mom immigrated to this country. So my hope is to give a little bit more perspective in the sense that I see both, and I experience both in a very real way. I also want to call up that I believe in humanity. I believe we can do better, always. I believe that people are innately good. And I think that it's life and experiences, situations that cause us to have experienced pain or trauma. And as a result, we end up letting that affect us in some cases so deeply that we go on and cause pain and trauma to other people. But I do believe that there's a desire to be good, and I believe that there's a desire for us to be together and united and not separated. So I think terminologies and words like color blindness is birthed from a place of good intention, but unfortunately it's also birthed from a place of ignorance. And that's where I think it's important for us to take time to hear each other's stories and to try to understand one another. So I hope I can do a little bit of that for you today as someone that you actually know and you can actually relate to on some level. So I think the best way to start is to share a little bit of my story, a little story time for you, share with you my life, my upbringing. As I shared with you already, I am biracial, in terms of my mother and my father. I have an older brother and an older sister who are 9 and 10 years older than me. And we grew up in what used to be a very small town that was probably about 98% white, middle to upper class, majority white town. I was, in fact, for the entire 12 years that I went to school there with, all of my classmates and friends from kindergarten until 12th grade, was the only Filipino in my entire school. There were a few other Asians that were there. Interestingly enough, the other Asians that were there, the majority of them were actually adopted by white parents. And there was also a handful of Black and Hispanic, other students as well. But needless to say, we were the minority by a long shot. And the interesting part for me, and this was a very different experience than my brother and my sisters, just that 9-10 year gap in terms of generation, their experiences was very different than mine. When I went to school, I had a beautiful life. I have to tell you, I literally had only two real experiences of racism growing up. In many ways, being a little different in the eyes of the people around me, to a great degree, worked to my advantage. And I will also say, without question, I benefited from white privilege. Without question. I think that when I grew up there, it was this feeling of, Angela sounds like us, and she likes the same things that we like, and she plays sports with me, and I think in many ways what was visible to them, despite the fact that I clearly looked quite different, than most of my classmates, was the fact that my mom, like many Filipinos, are mastermind assimilators. Like, they have the ability to go into any place in the world. You're going to go anywhere in the world, you're going to run into a Filipino. And maybe in some cases, like, not even know it, because their ability to assimilate, like, to turn off an accent in an instant, to turn it back on when they want, to participate in whatever culture that's there, and then go home to their houses and continue to foster their own culture at home. In many ways, like, I just think that when the people that were around me growing up, I think they just kind of were like, Angela's white. And there was never any real attempt by my classmates. The literal only exception was my best friend Kristen, which everybody knows on here already, and that really had any interest in getting to know or understand the Filipino side of me. In the summer times, I was very fortunate. My parents made a very real, genuine investment into me getting as much, immersion opportunity into my Filipino culture as possible since I was a little girl. Going out to San Diego with my relatives, which is like the polar opposite to where I grew up. It was a majority Filipino area, and where I grew up in a majority white area. And I got to be with my family there and immerse in the culture and the food and the language, and just make so much sense of myself and understand myself so much. And to then come home and meet and see my friends, people who were very close to me, and then try to share with them, like, what I just experienced, the look of genuine discomfort and sometimes pain that sounded like I was talking about an alien universe. And how could that be Angela? Because that's not Angela's culture. Over time, what just happened was I just stopped talking about it. Because I realized, like, instead of that being something that they would be excited about, it was causing them to feel like I was foreign to them. And I was something different and separate, which means that they felt uncomfortable and maybe even painful. Now, I will tell you guys, there is a whole other side to this, okay? Which is, in many ways, like I mentioned, my Filipino side and my experience in Southern California and was the exact opposite. Where there was color blindness in the white area was in this, like, whitewashing of me and just making me white. On the flip side of it, when I would be with my Filipino relatives, it would be a constant pointing out how white I was. Oh, your clothes make you look so white. Your hair makes you look so white. That nail polish you have on makes you look so white. And I'm sure that they were not saying this maliciously, and they were not saying in a way to try to hurt my feelings. It was just instinctually their reaction. Because, unfortunately, and this made me, and here's the thing, maybe, I don't know if any of my relatives are out there listening right now, but it made me feel sad for them to know and to witness that Asian and especially Filipino culture is holding on to a classist mentality associated with how dark complected someone was and how fair complected someone was. That they associated beauty and level of value and importance with how fair you were. When I looked at my relatives, especially those who were dark complected, and thought they were so beautiful, and I just was so excited to be with them and understand myself better. So it made me feel sad. It made me feel sad that they felt that way. And it makes me feel sad today, and it makes me feel kind of angry. Why would people of color perpetuate a mindset that how dark or light someone is has anything to do with their value, has anything to do with their beauty? It shouldn't have anything to do with it. So, guys, there is two very real sides to this coin of Angela. So this experience for me growing up, ranging from being whitewashed all the way over to having how fair complected I was being pointed out to me on a regular basis, was my experience. Now, did it take away from my incredible life? No. I have the most hands down amazing parents on the planet. Anybody here met them? You know what I'm talking about. They fostered it in me to value and hold true to every part of myself, to celebrate every part of myself, to not feel any need or desire to be affirmed by other people because I'm like other people that are around me. They never taught me that. They taught me to celebrate me and to be proud of that, every part of me. So now that you have a little history about me, I'm going to kind of flash forward a bit and head towards my evolution in coming out of the belief system that being colorblind was a good thing. As I got older, as I started to recognize my silence over the years, because keep in mind, even though I had moved away from my hometown and moved literally 15, 20 minutes down the road to Baltimore County, which was just a completely different environment than the town I grew up in, but I still spent about 10 years of my life as a volunteer youth minister, so I was still pretty deeply immersed in the community. And as I further distanced myself from the community and really got to know myself better and understand my identity more, it became a really sad realization to me of how many people didn't really know me. If you are stripping away from me something, my part of me, my culture that I actually relate to more, that I identify with stronger, that is where my family values reside, my Filipino side, it was the realization that man, there's so many people who think that they knew me, but they really didn't. And then it started to go deeper when I started to realize man, why didn't people acknowledge it growing up? Why was there such a huge desire to whitewash me? Why was there such a desire to just be she's white, and ignore it? Why didn't people hop the damn fence? Okay? And let me explain what I mean by that. Hop the fence. Don't just stay on your side of the fence and feel comfortable with me being on your side and understanding your perspective. Hop the fence and come over and have a genuine desire to learn my Filipino side. If you really want to know me, hop the fence. Have a desire to understand my culture. Have a desire to understand the language, the food, the environment. Be genuinely interested in getting to know all of me. And I think as I grew up and I got into my mid-20s and then it became even stronger into my late 20s, that this was a realization that being colorblind is not good. Being colorblind limits a person's ability to celebrate another person's culture. Guys, let me tell you something. There's all this yummy deliciousness of diversity, this yummy deliciousness of the flavor and the spices of life that are taken away from choosing consciously to not only surround yourself by people that are not like you and don't look like you and don't talk like you and don't walk like you and don't dress like you. There's so much to benefit from that, but it will bring in relationships. It will heighten your life and your understanding. And it will bring so much to your life. And it literally, again, it makes me sad because I look around right now and everything that's going on in the world and all this feeling of separation in this country and people using terms like race baiting and, and trying to act like it's no big deal and leave the past in the past as if history doesn't mean something. And there's not a desire to actually hop the fence and understand somebody else's perspective and somebody else's life. Ask the questions. Be interested. I would love for anyone in my life to ask me questions about what it was like for me to grow up the way that I did and for me to have the life experiences that I did. I would love it. I would invite it happily any day. I would even invite and love questions that maybe aren't politically correct. And people feel like, oh, that's a racially sensitive topic. It's okay. Because what that tells me is you care enough about me to ask the question. You care enough about me to get uncomfortable. My best friend Kristen, who I mentioned, is the only person who ever was interested in knowing my life. Hopped on a plane for the first time in her life at 18, flew across the country with me, went to San Diego. She got there, and as excited as she was, within a couple hours of being there in this environment where everybody's speaking a different language, and we're eating different food, and we're just like making the joyous noise that we make of our family, and in tight quarters, because apparently that's like where we like to be. And all of a sudden I noticed she wasn't in the room anymore, and I went upstairs to find her crying, and she was crying because she was so overwhelmed and admittedly experiencing culture shock. And she experienced it and had a little bit of a painful moment, and then she let it go, and then she opened herself up to just immerse herself in all of this. And we went on, of course, for decades later, us continuing to have those type of experiences together. She's now raising biracial children. I'm raising multiracial children, and that's our lives, and we've created and fostered our own cultures that we celebrate, all of them, all the time. So again, I just hope that hearing this, like, if you in fact were someone, even to this day now, that wanted to believe that being colorblind was a good thing, maybe you'll look at that a little differently. I'm not sitting here claiming that you're a bad person for that. Like I said, I actually believe that term was birthed from a place of good intention. But I think it's also coming to acceptance that it's also birthed from a place of ignorance, right? One of the other things too is, like, again, now hearing my story and being somebody that I recently was listening to an author being interviewed, and she wrote the book Surviving the White Glaze. And she was actually a black woman who was adopted by white parents, and she was raised in a white town. And as she was sharing her experience, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds so familiar. Like all of her experiences. And the main difference between us is that unfortunately her parents, and it's called transracial adoption, did not make the effort. And they're wonderful people, and she just like me, a wonderful upbringing, but they didn't make any effort to go through any cultural immersion what it means to be a Black American. And that was something she had to do through a process of her own when she became an adult, to go figure it out on her own, and to go seek that out on her own, and to celebrate it, because that certainly wasn't something celebrated when she grew up. Instead, people did the whole whitewashing, colorblind thing, and it was something that, again, was missing. And really, she had to go through her own independent process of filling that hole in her life. I just present these scenarios to say, like, these are great examples of situations to just help people understand what people are going through and what their experiences are, and to try to stay open-minded and to not make judgments or assumptions. I'll kind of wrap this up at this point, and I'll say this. We obviously, as not only Americans, but as the human race, have a long way to go. We've got a long way to go towards understanding. We've got a long way to go towards celebrating differences instead of looking for ways to be separated from one another. We've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go towards loving and respecting each other, even if we don't agree, and realizing that ultimately any human being probably can find that they have more in common than they have that is different, if we just take the time to really talk to each other and we communicate and we leave space in our hearts to do that. So I acknowledge that, and here's the great news. I think we can get there. I'm optimistic, especially with our younger generations. I am really optimistic that our young people are going to be the key. They're going to be the key to lead this and to get us where we need to go. But I also want to challenge you. Everybody here, anybody who has a chance to listen to this, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to dig in, look into the things that we struggle with, overcome the denial that racism isn't a problem in this country. It's a problem. Overcome the denial that we don't have a very deep history beyond in terms of racism. Overcome the desire to believe that any skin tone is the original owner of this country, can call this their own, that any other particular shade of skin can say that American culture is that culture. It's not. It's all of it. Every one of us are a part of American culture. Every shade of skin, every ethnicity built this country on their backs, every one of them. And there is no supremacy of one color or ethnicity or culture over another. Just isn't. Just the facts, folks. And hopefully we can start to overcome and recognize when we're in denial, we can't get better. We're going to have to face those truths, and we're going to have to be able to move forward facing those realities that these things are real. Beyond overcoming these things and overcoming that denial is I also challenge people to not convince yourselves that surrounding yourselves by people who you think are like you for the purpose of feeling affirmation is a good thing. It's really not going to bring anything richer to your life to be surrounded by a bunch of people who are just like you, that look like you, that you think like you, and they can't. It's not really possible. Every person is unique. You know, surrounding people who you believe are, you know, exclusively following the same religious values as you or political views as you, that doesn't enrich your life. Enriching your life involves exposing yourself to people that are very different than you, at least you believe are initially very different than you, until you talk to them and you realize it's probably not true. So I really challenge you to that. And overcome those moments where you're feeling really uncomfortable. Those moments where you're afraid and you're avoiding people who you think could say or do or be something out of your comfort zone. I really encourage you to pursue those conversations. Talk to those people. Sit down. Ask questions. Get to know folks that make you feel the most uncomfortable. Those are the moments of growth. Those are the moments where you really are going to find yourself in a place of enlightenment and in a place of having greater things to contribute to the world. Because guess what? Your views matter too. Your life experiences matter too. And by you opening up, other people are going to be interested in you too. So I hope that all of this, you know, it's not, I don't want to come across in a lecturing kind of way. I want to come across in a way that I'm sharing and I'm being really vulnerable and I'm being really candid. And I recognize that there are probably parts of what I've shared about my childhood that people might be like, oh, well, you know, that wasn't my intention. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to do this, or I thought I did know you, or I saw it differently, or no one here has to defend themselves. Nobody here has to feel like they have anything to explain, because trust me, I understand. I was there. I've been on both sides. And, you know, I understand it from both viewpoints. So thank you guys for your time. Thank you for listening and hearing and genuinely trying to understand. Thank you again so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I, you know, really just celebrate with all of you, you know, all of the different things that I know that you bring to my life. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Bye.